In the heart of a valley where the sun rarely reached
Just
the
one
forest
more should
floor,
do it.
a young girl named Ilara spent her days gathering rare herbs. The forest was ancient, filled with trees that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. One afternoon, following a trail of luminescent butterflies, Ilara stumbled upon the ruins of a temple
What is this
swallowed by
place?
ivy. In the center of a courtyard, standing perfectly upright amidst the rubble, was a mirror. Its frame was forged from a metal that seemed to breathe, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic violet light. Ilara approached with caution. The glass was not like the polished bronze or silver she had seen in the village. It was deep and liquid, like a pool of still water at midnight. As she stood before it, she did not see her own face. Instead, the mirror showed the temple not as a ruin, but in its former glory, shining with gold, filled with priests and music. The contrast between the cold, damp stone of her reality and the warm, vibrant life within the glass was mesmerizing. She reached out, her fingers hovering just inches from the surface. The air around the mirror grew warm, and the sound of the forest faded into a low, melodic hum. Ilara felt a strange pull, a sense that the mirror was not just showing the past, but something deeper. It was a window into the soul of the world. She decided she could not leave such a powerful thing behind in the mud. Using her heavy cloak and sturdy vines, she began the long, arduous task of dragging the heavy relic back toward her village, unaware that the violet light was beginning to seep into the shadows following closely behind her. By the time Ilara reached the edge of her village, the sun was setting. She set the mirror against the wall of her small cottage and collapsed from exhaustion. In the morning light, the true nature of the mirror revealed itself. As the villagers passed by, the mirror did not show their outward appearance. A merchant, known for his beautiful silk robes and polite smiles, walked past. In the mirror, he appeared as a man made of tangled, thorny brambles, clutching bags of sand that leaked through his fingers. A young woman, often mocked for her plain face and ragged clothes, walked by next. In the glass, she shone like a star, her skin made of starlight and her heart visible as a glowing diamond. Ilara watched in silence, realization dawning on her. The mirror showed the truth of a person's character, stripped of vanity and pretense. She looked at her own garden. To the naked eye, it was a modest patch of vegetables. Through the mirror, the plants were vibrant and musical, each leaf vibrating with the care she had given them. However, the joy of discovery was short-lived. Word of the seeing glass spread through the village like wildfire. People began to gather, at first out of curiosity, then with growing fear. They saw their greed, their secrets, and their hidden cruelties reflected in the liquid silver surface. Some wept, while others grew angry, throwing stones that simply bounced off the indestructible glass. The atmosphere of the village shifted from one of community to one of deep suspicion. People began to wear masks and thick cloaks, not to hide from the cold, but to hide from the truth that Ilara had brought into their midst. The violet light of the mirror grew brighter, feeding on the tension.
But not like this.
News of the mirror eventually reached the great citadel, where King Malachor ruled with an iron fist. The king was a man obsessed with his own legacy, surrounding himself with golden statues and flatterers who told him he was the most beloved ruler in history. When his soldiers arrived in Ilara's village, they did not ask for the mirror. They took it by force. Ilara watched from the shadows as the heavy relic was loaded onto a gilded carriage, the violet light dimming as it was smothered under a heavy black shroud. The journey to the citadel was marked by a strange silence. Birds stopped singing as the carriage passed, and the soldiers grew irritable and paranoid. Inside the castle, Malachor ordered the mirror to be placed in his private throne room. He dismissed his guards and stood alone before the object, expecting to see a godlike figure of immense power and beauty. Instead, the mirror rippled with a sickening, oily blackness. It showed a hollow shell of a man, his skin gray and cracking like parchment. Inside his chest, where a heart should be, there was only a bottomless pit of swirling smoke. The crown on his head in the reflection was not gold, but made of human teeth and broken promises. Malachor stepped back, his face contorted in a silent scream of rage. He realized that the mirror was his greatest enemy. He could command his subjects to lie, but he could not command the glass. He ordered the room to be sealed with lead and iron, but the truth had already begun to leak through the cracks of the castle walls, infecting his dreams and turning his palace into a tomb of secrets. Determined to hide his true nature, King Malachor summoned the most powerful sorcerers in the land. He commanded them to fix the mirror, to make it show the world not as it was, but as he wished it to be. The sorcerers worked in shifts, chanting incantations and pouring molten gold into the liquid silver surface. Slowly, the violet glow was replaced by a harsh, artificial amber light. The mirror began to broadcast an illusion that filled the entire throne room and seeped out into the city streets. Suddenly, the crumbling walls of the citadel appeared to be made of solid emerald. The starving beggars in the streets looked like well-fed nobles in fine linen. The king himself looked young and radiant in every reflection. The people were enchanted. They stopped working, stopped caring for their children, and simply stared at the reflections in the palace windows, lost in a dream of perfection. Ilara, who had followed the soldiers to the city, saw the horror of the transformation. She walked through the marketplace, seeing people eating rotten fruit while believing it was nectar because the mirror's aura told them so. The city had become a gilded prison, a place where the truth was buried under layers of beautiful lies. The king sat on his throne, staring into the altered mirror, trapped in a loop of his own vanity. He did not notice that the shadows in the corners of the room were growing longer, or that the amber light was slowly draining the life force from everyone who looked upon it. The false paradise was a trap, and the world was beginning to wither away underneath the golden veil. The strain of maintaining the massive illusion began to take its toll on the mirror. Fine spiderweb cracks started to appear at the edges of the frame. Each time a crack formed, the golden veil over the city flickered. For a split second, the emerald towers would turn back into decaying stone, and the vibrant gardens would revert to ash. These flickers caused a sense of profound vertigo and madness among the citizens. They began to fight one another, desperate to cling to the beautiful dream as the reality of their suffering bled through. Ilara realized that the mirror was dying and taking the kingdom with it. The artificial magic was rotting the core of the relic. In the throne room, the king had become a statue, his eyes wide and vacant, fixed on the shimmering amber surface. He no longer moved or ate. He was a prisoner of his own reflection. The sorcerers had long since fled, terrified by the monstrosity they had created. The shadows that had been following the mirror since the ruins finally began to emerge. They were the unseen truths that had been suppressed by the king's magic. They took the form of dark, faceless wraiths that glided through the palace, reclaiming the stolen light. Whenever a wraith touched a piece of the illusion, it dissolved into gray dust. Ilara knew she had to act before the mirror shattered completely, for if it broke while filled with the king's corruption, the truth would be lost forever, leaving the world in a state of permanent, hollow darkness. She began her ascent into the heart of the palace, guided only by the faint, dying violet pulse from deep within the amber. Ilara navigated the palace like a ghost. The guards were no obstacle. They were too busy staring at their own hands, enchanted by the fading glow. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and old dust. As she reached the great hall, she saw the spirits of those the mirror had consumed. They were pale, transparent figures wandering aimlessly, their faces blank. They were the people who had completely given themselves over to the mirror's lies, losing their true selves in the process. She found the entrance to the throne room barred by massive iron doors. They were hot to the touch, vibrating with the energy of the dying relic. Ilara did not have a key, but she remembered the temple where she had found the mirror. She remembered the butterflies and the way the light had responded to her touch. She placed her hands on the iron and focused on the memory of the forest, the smell of rain, the feeling of dirt under her fingernails, the honest weight of the herbs she gathered. The iron doors did not break, they melted. The honesty of her intent acted as a solvent to the king's manufactured barriers. She stepped into the throne room, which was now a swirling vortex of amber light and black shadows. In the center, the king sat motionless, a literal shell of a human being. The mirror was screaming, a high-pitched crystalline sound that vibrated in Ilara's bones. It was a cry for release. The amber gold was suffocating the liquid silver, and the frame was warping under the pressure. Ilara moved toward the center of the storm, her small figure dwarfed by the collapsing reality around her. As Ilara reached the mirror, her own reflection appeared, fighting for space amidst the king's illusions. The mirror tried to tempt her. It showed her a version of herself that was a queen, a girl who would never have to work in the mud again, who would be loved by all and feared by none. It offered her a shortcut to a life of ease. Ilara looked at the Queen Ilara in the glass, seeing the hollowness in her eyes. She saw that the perfect version of herself had no calluses on her hands, no stains on her cloak, and no soul in her gaze. She turned her eyes away from the temptation and looked at the king. She saw the threads of amber light connecting his chest to the mirror, pumping the lie into his veins. With a surge of courage, Ilara did not try to break the mirror. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a handful of the bitter, dark herbs she had gathered in the valley, the herbs of remembrance. She threw them into the liquid surface of the mirror. The effect was instantaneous. The organic, earthy matter of the herbs acted like a poison to the artificial gold. The amber light turned a sickly green and then vanished. The king's illusion shattered with a sound like 1,000 falling chandeliers. The king let out a dry, rattling gasp as the threads were severed. He collapsed from his throne, falling into a heap of old, moth-eaten robes. The mirror returned to its natural state, deep, liquid violet, but the cracks remained. The mirror was waiting for a final decision. It could either shatter and destroy the kingdom's mind, or it could be cleansed. Ilara took the heavy iron poker from the fireplace and struck the mirror's frame, not the glass. The metal that breathed finally broke. The liquid silver poured out of the frame like a waterfall, washing over the throne room floor and flowing out of the palace windows. It didn't drown the city, it washed it. As the silver touched the emerald walls, they turned back into sturdy, honest stone. As it touched the people, the golden masks fell from their faces. The people woke up as if from a long, feverish sleep. They looked at their ragged clothes and their empty bellies, and for the first time in years, they felt the truth of their situation. There was no magic to save them, only their own hands and each other. The king, now just an old man with nothing but his memories, wandered out into the courtyard, looking at the ruins of his vanity. The mirror itself was gone, leaving only the empty metal frame. Ilara stood in the quiet throne room as the first rays of a real sun rose over the horizon. The violet light was gone, replaced by the warm, natural yellow of morning. She left the palace and began the long walk back to her valley. As she passed through the village, she saw people working together to repair their homes, no longer hiding behind cloaks or masks. They were tired and they were poor, but their eyes were clear. Ilara returned to her ruins, where the butterflies still danced. She knew the truth was a heavy thing to carry, but as she looked at her reflection in a simple puddle of rainwater, she smiled. For the first time, the world was exactly what it appeared to be.
Just one more should do it.